My name is Justyna Czechowska. I'm a translator from Swedish into Polish. I'm a member of Stowarzyszenie Tłumaczy Literatury, Polish Association, and a member of the board of CEATL. Let me start this panel on translating and publishing as a political act with an extract from PEN Charter. Literature knows no frontiers and must remain common currency among people in spite of political or international upheavals. In all circumstances, and particularly in time of war, works of art, the patrimony of humanity at large, should be left untouched by national or political passion. And before I give the floor to my panelists, I would like to point out some events from recent years and actually weeks, which will be very important for this panel. In August 2021, due to the Hungarian law, books promoting homosexuality can only be sold tightly packed out of children's and young adults' bookstore departments. In August 9, 2021, court in Minsk declares Belarusian pen illegal. Shortly, Belarusian pen rises again in Warsaw, Poland, and works from there until now. In 2023, in the report of PEN International, we read the number of writers and translators imprisoned. For examples, Turkey 14, Belarus 16, Russia 16, China 107. When we go to 2024, August 30th, 2024, in European Solidarity Center in Gdańsk, Poland, Freedom of Speech Decoration was awarded to Prolokela Silesiana, Society for Promoting of Silesian Language. It's a very small language in southern Poland. September 18 to 22, International Festival of Literature and Freedom of Speech takes place in Stavanger, Norway, and it's dedicated to family. September 24, a bookstore and a Kurdish language association are targets of police raids in Diyarbakir, Turkey. Hundreds of books and periodicals were seized. September 22 to 28, Banned Books Week in America took place, organized since 1982. September 24 to 27, 19th PEN International Annual Congress in Oxford was entitled Writers in a World at War. September 26 to 29, International Book Fair in Gothenburg had Sápmi as guest of honor. Sápmi, which is a folk group with the language and culture in Northern Europe banned for decades and centuries. My guests at this panel are Julie Belgrado, the director of European and International Booksellers Federation, Nadya Kandrusevich, the translator from Swedish into Belarusian, publisher of children's books in Belarusian language, the publishing called Czechowska. Alena Makouskaya, in 2019, was elected a board member of European Writers' Council, and in 2021 became a manager of a translation project for Belarusian and Ukrainian writers, #FreeAllWords, set up by EWC. And in 2022, Alena became a member of the European Council contact group for Belarus. Ágnes Orzóy is a foreign rights manager at Magvető Publishing, the leading publisher of Hungarian literary fiction. Furkan Özkan, translates from Russian to Turkish, is a member of the Technical Science Board of Turkish Association of Literary Translators. and Jørgen Christian Wind Nielsen in recent years have been a member of the board of Danish PEN and vice chair and secretary of the Translation and Linguistic Rights Committee at PEN International. And I need to add that for the reason of personal safety, some of the panelists decided not to talk about the whole story behind what they want to say, so that you know and respect it. And now I would like to give the floor to Alena with your presentation.
Thank you so much. And thank you. I'm very impressed by this event. Thank you for invitation, and I feel very good atmosphere. I'm in collaborative and friendly atmosphere at this event. And to tell the truth, I have never seen so many translators in one place. But coming back to serious things, I represent also a board member of the European Writers' Council, but at the same time, I'm director of the International Union of Belarusian Writers that is registered now in Lithuania, in Vilnius. Because the Union of Belarusian Writers that was working in Belarus, it was liquidated as many other, more than 1,000 civil society organizations of the country. You know that in 2020 mass protests turned over Belarus. And a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people took part in this protest. It was absolutely peaceful demonstration of our will. But nevertheless, the regime brutally suppressed the protests, and thousands of people were detained. And also, you know that, just to compare, we are about 9 million in the country, 9,100,000 in the country. And according to different sources of information, around 500,000 of Belarusians were forced to flee the country. And among them, there are IT specialists, doctors, teachers, musicians, librarians, representatives of creative industries, writers, and a lot of other people. Lukashenko said that he would find everyone who took part in the protests and punished them. That's why every day up to now we receive news from our countries about new detention, about cases of torture in the prisons, about abuses in the prisons while speaking about political prisoners. A person in the country can be detained or arrested just for some comment on social media. As of September the 15th, according to information of Belarusian PEN that regularly make a monitor of the infringement of cultural rights in the country, 163 representatives of the cultural sectors are behind the bars in Belarus. And since 2020, more than 4,000 of people are recognized as political prisoners by the human rights defenders. And among these political prisoners, there is Ales Beliatsky. Probably you heard his name because he is a Nobel Prize winner, human rights activist, and writer also. But it's not only one problem, because in order to maintain his power after presidential election, Lukashenko has turned Belarus into a political and economical satellite of Russia, thus having opened the door to the Ruski Svet, Russian propaganda. And we must say today that the authorities in Belarus are destroying the national humanitarian sphere, the basis for the formation of people's worldview. Textbooks are being rewritten, also books of our independent writers and historians are taken away from the libraries, from the bookshelves of bookshops. And all this is making in favor of Russian imperial narratives. In 2021, President of the European Writers' Council, Nina Gheorghe, asked the Belarusian writers in the country what can be done by the European writers community in order to support Belarusian writers. And the answer was that as soon as we keep silence in the country, please make our voices to be heard in Europe. Thus was created the idea of Free All Words Fund. And as soon as in 2022 Russia started its aggression against Ukraine, EWC without hesitation decided to invite Ukrainian authors to take part in the project. And now I want to come back to the presentation and to show you how do we work. So our sake is very ambitious, 1 million words for freedom of speech. And you see that we are only on the, we just achieved a part of our way. The next slide, please. This is our idea, this is our mission, and here you see the list of our founders. I will not repeat them, and also our partners, and CEATL is among them, as you see. The next slide, please. So, the project started in 2022, and now we cooperate with 51 translators that live in 21 countries, and they can translate into 15 languages. You can see the languages. Totally, we have also 46 authors that take part in our project from Ukraine and from Belarus. And during this period, almost 212 prose and poetry texts were translated. The next slide, please. And I think that better of all, people who take part in the project, I mean authors, can speak about this project. That's why shortly I just give some of the works of our authors that take part in the project. This is Natalia Matalinets from Ukraine. But more works, more authors, more translators, you can see at our website, Free All Words. The next slide, please. Mariana Kianovska, also Ukraine. The next slide, please. Andrei Kostinsky and Nadia Gavrilyuk. It's not their works, but it's pieces of their letters that they write to the project. The next slide, it's Natalia Trahim. She is a member of our selective committee, because we have a selection committee that takes the decisions about authors, about the quality of their works, whom to translate. And one representative of our selection committee is from Belarus, another one from Ukraine, and one more is from Lithuania. Next slide, please. It's Katerina Andreeva. She's a journalist, she's a writer, a young girl. She was sentenced at first, at the beginning, to 2 years of the prison, and afterward to 8 years, and she is still there. You see her poem is very full of love. The next slide, please. Hannah Komar. It's translator, also poet. Now she is in Great Britain. And the next slide. Ales Belyatsky. I took a part of his speech he was not able to, for sure, to say his speech because he was detained. But it is from the speech that his wife said. And the next slide, I shortly will stop on, for sure, as every project, we have challenges, we have problems, and they are a little bit different one because they belong to our region, because you know that at the beginning, when the war started, Ukrainian authors, Ukrainian literary circles were not very much friendly with Belarusians because of the war, because our country became a co-aggressor. And we try to explain that we have dictatorship, but nevertheless, we cannot blame anyone here because we understand it is some kind of collective responsibility. So that we bear responsibility what our dictator is doing, probably in this way, I don't know. Well, also invisible cultures. It's really became a problem at the beginning because most of translators were addressed to they were not able to translate directly from Belarusian or Ukrainian language. Mostly they worked with Russian language. And at the beginning we made interlinear translations into Russian and only after that into Belarusian and Ukrainian. But for us it was very important to build real partnership with translators and we explained that for sure during Soviet time we live under the domination of Russian culture, and after that Russia as big country, as empire, was promoting its culture, and that's why it was big interest in the world to the Russian culture. But for us it was very important for the translators to be able to translate directly, and I must say that most, probably half of our translators now can work directly with Belarusian and Ukrainian languages. Well, one more problem was that most of our participants present their poetry works, and you know that it is complicated to work with poetry because of many levels and so on. And also we have such phenomenon in Belarus as prison literature. And a lot of people, a lot of writers and representatives of cultural sectors, they send to their relatives some kind of their works, and for now we are working on the book even of such kind of prison literature, and we met a problem that translators does not always know how to translate, and we address the former political prisoners in order to make special vocabulary for our translators to translate all the specific words. Also, one more emotional problem is that you deal with authors that are in Belarus, and you never know how the publication will affect them at the website. That's why some of our authors stay without names, without noting the names. Also, our authors in Ukraine, we have never been experienced in communicating and in dealing with authors who are under the war conditions. And one more question here, one more issue, it's emotional burnout, because I mean that we are all also Belarusians, we were forced to flee the country, we are all immigrants, our future is uncertain as probably the future of our whole region. And we take very closely all the works of our authors from Belarus and both from Ukraine. The next slide, please. And here are our heroes, our authors. And the next one. And here are also our heroes, our translators. Thank you.
Nadya Kandrusevich.
Hello. Thank you, CEATL, for inviting me, and thank you for this opportunity to be visible and to speak about my situation. My name is Nadya Kandrusevich, and I'm a translator and a publisher. I translate children's literature from Swedish into Belarusian for the last 20 years, and 6 years ago I founded a small independent publishing house, Czechowska, in Belarus, that publishes books for children translated into Belarusian language. However, 2 years ago, I was forced to leave my country, and what I do these 2 years is trying to find a way to continue working as a translator and a publisher in exile. The language situation in Belarus is catastrophic. Actually, Belarusian language is on the list of the languages that can disappear in the nearest future. Although there are 2 official languages in Belarus, Russian and Belarusian, the majority of the population speak Russian. And we talked about that a little bit during the workshop on language equality with Mikhail yesterday, that we actually have a bilingual book market in Belarus. That means that everyone in Belarus can read and speak Russian and can choose books in which language to buy in the bookshop. Books sold in the bookstores are mainly in Russian, and since Belarus has practically no border with Russia, books in Russian overflow Belarusian book market. And if we keep in mind the size of these 2 countries and the population, 150 million people in Russia and only 9 million in Belarus, and you can that means the circulation of the books coming in Russian is huge, much more bigger comparing to that in Belarusian. And we can think about the difference in price of the books as well. So you realize how catastrophic language situation is, and also the situation for the independent publishers inside the country. I grew up in a Belarusian spoken family. When I was little, my father used to read to me before going to bed. There was not so many children books in Belarusian at that time, 40 years ago. And I remember how he was reading Pippi Longstocking, written by Astrid Lindgren, and simultaneously translating that book from Russian into Belarusian to me. And he used to tell to me, maybe one day you will grow up and become a translator and translate Pippi yourself. But when I grew up and learned Swedish, Pippi has already been translated into Belarusian. But still, there were very, very few good books for children in my native language. Those that were available were either of poor quality, with not so good illustrations, or written in an old Soviet tradition with pedagogical and from adult to child perspective. So I decided to do what I can and to use all my knowledge and skills so that children in Belarus will have access to best stories and good quality children's literature in their native language, in Belarusian. I started translating Swedish authors into Belarusian, and at first I was publishing my translation in different independent publishing houses, but 6 years ago I founded my own publishing house, Czechowska. I tried to translate the books that haven't been translated into Russian, or translate them first into Belarusian. During 5 years of work, I published around 50 books, with the total amount 50,000 copies, sending them to the libraries in Belarus and some schools. It was important for me not only publish the books, but also invite authors and illustrators from Sweden so that children can meet them. I organized presentation of books, exhibitions of illustrations from the books, and different kinds of lectures. So good news here, children in Belarus met translators and authors at the very early age. However, all that activity, translating and publishing books, can become a political act in the 21st century. One can be sanctioned or punished for, and even imprisoned. And once again, we can see how important weapon a language and books can be in a country where government wants to control everything. The state system that fears free people with critical thinking, empathy, courage, and civil engagement. The state system that fears everything that makes people free: history, music, art, literature, even books for children. Many people in Belarus who grew up in this system are trying to break out of the system, to break out of the atmosphere of lies, fear, and violence. Parents want to read books for their children that make them free, and the books that do not preach nor moralize. The books in which a child is a full-fledged participant in the events, and in which the author treats a child as an equal and does not fear to discuss complex topics. In 2020, during the mass protest in Belarus, authorities started punishing and persecuting everyone who was connected with Belarusian language. Several independent publishers were put to prison for their activities. Many have left the country. Nowadays, there are practically no independent publishing house left in Belarus. Only state ones. And translating and publishing books for children in Belarusian in Belarus may lead to dramatic consequences. I had to leave the country and think of new ways to reach my readers. Thousands of Belarusian families with children, both inside the country and those who are now spread around the world and live in many European countries. There is no transport connection between Belarus and Europe, so I can't publish physical books in Europe and transport them to my country and vice versa. So as a publisher, the only way to reach the readers, both in Belarus and Europe nowadays, is to make books digital. To make children books digital is not that common, especially if there is a possibility to publish, buy, and read paper books. But in my situation, it is the only way to give children inside and outside the country the possibility to read the books in their native language. So now, for the last 2 years, I have been working on creating a digital platform, koskabooks.com, where I can gather all the books that have already been published physically and those that are going to be translated and may be published physically one day, I hope so, where parents will be able to buy books in the form of electronic books and download them to their devices and read for their children in Belarusian. Because I believe that if children do not have the access to good books and stories in their native language, there will be no readers of adult literature and no thinking people in future. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Nadya, and thank you for your wonderful work you're doing. And now I give the floor to Ágnes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So someone in the previous panel said that they were going to talk about the gathering of data, which is not very sexy. And actually, for me, gathering data is much more sexy than talking about politics. But I know for some people it is. I much prefer to talk about literature and publishing, but anyway, that's what I was asked to talk about, so that's what I will talk about. So anyway, in the short time I have left, I thought I would tackle two topics. I will first make some general comments on freedom of speech in publishing during communism and after, and some challenges that we face today. And then talk about two recent developments that I'm often asked about in international audiences. One was the law mentioned by Justyna. And finally, I will end with an untranslatable pun, which may be uncalled for, but anyway, that's what I will do. So next slide, please. So during the communist era, there was censorship. There were directives coming straight from the so-called Publishers Directorate. And the first thing they did was to decide if the author is okay ideologically or not, and that was the famous 3 T's, which are 3 Hungarian words starting with T for supported, tolerated, and banned. And if the author fell into the first 2 categories, then the censors at publishing houses, who were called readers, assessed if the book is publishable or not. Actually, censors then turned out to be people who were often on the sides of the authors. Now, after the change of regime, there was this question asked quite often and sarcastically, how come there was nothing in writers' drawers? How come nothing was found after communism ended? And there's quite simple answer to that, and that is apathy. If artists became apathetic, they lost their creativity, so they not only could not publish works, but they couldn't write them. Of course, there were still many masterpieces, but the fact that there were not many found in drawers is very easy to account for. And the other reason is self-censorship, and that's a very important concept that I will come back to later. Now, after the change of regime, people started to talk freely, and taboo topics were started to be discussed. But that very soon turned out that that can also be just as big a problem. On the one hand, talking about certain things in a certain tone hurt people's sensitivity. On the other, it led to unintended consequences. And it led to an inflation of words as well. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we face today in publishing. On the one hand, and I think it's not only true to Hungary, it's true elsewhere as well, that it is a challenge to find readers who are interested in controversial topics. And of course, it's not easy to answer why that is, but I made some educated guesses here, and one is that people prefer to be reinforced in their bubbles. They don't want to read books that challenge their views, so they will not read about controversial topics. The other thing is escapism, meaning that since the situation is not easy, not at home and not in the world, then rather than reading challenging books, people prefer to read books that entertain them, that give them easy and pleasant entertainment. And that's where the economic aspect comes in, because if a publisher receives subventions and if they have money for marketing, they obviously have much more chance to reach readers, and for that a literature support system is needed. And there is a literature support system in Hungary. There are a few institutions, some of them are old, some of them are new, but unfortunately the whole system is very unstable, very unreliable. Some of them don't work transparently, others lack funds, again others are boycotted for political reasons by artists, so it's quite hard to find adequate support. And as I said, I would turn back to the question of self-censorship, which I think exists everywhere. Probably everybody in this room exercises some self-censorship in certain things and to certain extents, but the consequences differ, as we just heard. It goes from imprisonment to losing some friends and losing finances, and perhaps in Eastern Europe we are more sensitive to self-censorship. So where I feel self-censorship, looking from the point of view of the publisher, is that some institutions, libraries, foreign institutes, do not invite some of our authors for fear of reprisal. And next slide, please. And so I will say a few words about what is called the anti-LGBTQ law. Of course, that's not the name, but that's how it's often referred to. And in fact, it's a law where there was a law enacted in 2021 for the protection of children against pedophiles. And later the same year came an amendment to that law, which was a trade law, and that was what Justyna was talking about, which concerned products intended for children if they display or promote deviation from one's birth gender identity, or promote homosexuality, or portray sexuality in a self-serving way. They must be sold separately in separate packaging, and must not be sold within 200 meters of churches and schools. Now, as you see, it does not contain any prohibition to publish, so we can go on publishing anything we want. The only thing is that probably some publishers tend to publish less of such content, since they cannot distribute them. They can, but not in any way they want. And it must be noted that the law was formulated in very unclear terms, in very vague language, like what does it mean to portray sexuality in a self-serving way, or to promote homosexuality. We have an author, a poet, who we are publishing a poetry book by, who is a lesbian, and she writes about how horrible it is to be a lesbian in Hungary. So does that promote homosexuality, or doesn't it? So that's not very easy to decide now. And so the fact that it's formulated in unclear terms has the consequence that punishments are very random. Our group, for example, was very severely punished, and some others were less severely punished. So to sum this up, although there is definitely a moral component in this law, which makes it popular with many voters, that is the protection of children and the safeguarding of traditional family values, it is clearly a very political law, which creates confusion among publishers and distributors and is often used to harm opponents. And as you can see from those numbers down there, the ratio of such books turned out to be very low. We did not know that before, but now we know that around 12,000 books are published annually in Hungary, with 40 to 60,000 books in stock, and about 300 to 500 were reported, and you can see the percentage of such books. Next slide, please. The other recent development that I'm often asked about is the acquisition of the Libre group. Libre is the biggest distribution company in Hungary, which also owns a number of major publishers. And government politicians have stated for years that their aim was to have a national publisher and distributor. And in fact, in 2023, Libre was acquired by MCC, which is a foundation, which is the training center for the party elite, which is financed very lavishly by the state, and the chairman is Viktor Orbán's political director. Now, in the year that has passed ever since, what we know is that the marketing staff was changed completely. However, as we know from the publishers, they remained autonomous. So that's what we know now. Next slide, please. This is the last one, and as I promised, I would finish with an untranslatable pun by Dezső Tandori, who is a Hungarian poet who died recently, and it says, szólásszabadság van, nem szólhatunk egy szót se. And if you translate the meaning, there is freedom of speech, so we cannot complain. But if you translate it literally, it says, there is freedom of speech, so we cannot say a word. I love this quote on the one hand because it illustrates the power of literature, which is not just exciting stories and plot, and unlike academic writing, it does not say things in an argumentative, straightforward way, but uses figures of speech, which is often more powerful. It also illustrates the power of translation, because I challenge AI to translate that, at least at this moment. And it also illustrates the situations I was talking about. So the situation where there is officially freedom of speech, but in fact there isn't. And also the situation where you are in fact allowed to say whatever you want, but it's hard to convey your message to readers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ágnes. And now I would like to take us all to Turkey and ask Furkan Özkan for the word.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for CEATL for the invitation too. I didn't prepare any presentation too, but I'm gonna summarize the topic about Turkey, and there will be sample books translations, and there will be a comparison between similarities Turkey and the European Union countries in terms of freedom of speech. The current state of freedom of speech in Turkey is actually not good for any of the parties in the population. What I mean here, the ruling party draws boundaries of freedom of speech for everyone, even for the pro-ruling party supporters. So the government imposes what to talk about, what not to talk about for the citizens. It doesn't matter you are a supporter, it doesn't matter you are in the opposition side. So, and these topics can be various. It can be about the political situation, traditional societal cleavages in Turkey, crimes, religion, and the political decisions, of course. And the ruling party tries to impose what to talk about, as I said, and trying to set even what to criticize and what not to criticize. And if you exceed the limits set by the ruling party, you can get arrested and be jailed pending trial, whether you are a translator, whether you are a writer, or you are a citizen. So there are three main points showing how the ruling party controls freedom of speech. I know that we want to limit the debate to books. However, without explaining the overall situation about this social engineering, it will be hard to understand why generally journalists' books are banned or why there are files against some of the books. So the government is controlling social media and the internet. In 2022, the ruling party passed a law, so-called disinformation law, and this law introduced a provision into Turkish penal code saying propagation of false or misleading information contrary to the internal and external security of the country and likely to harm public health, disturb public order, spread fear or panic among the population, is punishable by 1 to 3 years in prison. As you can see, this law can be interpreted easily in a way that the judge can think that, okay, you violated this law and you can get punishment. So this is one side of it. And of course, after this passing of the law, a total of 46 investigations were conducted against 40 journalists. 5 websites were blocked, and a lot of news contents were blocked based on the URL. And there is another part of social engineering. The government is paying the real people, the social media trolls and bots, so that they can direct the people's opinion about the certain matters or direct them to support the government's decisions or any political, especially foreign political decisions of the government. And also they have been doing that to impose what is acceptable and what is not acceptable from their world view. From almost the very beginning, the members of the ruling party have been telling that they couldn't conquer the Turkey's cultural scene, which has been predominantly influenced by the secular side of the country. They said that the cultural hegemony could not be broken and they need more time. Therefore, alongside the first 2 steps, and actually very similar to Hungary's distribution company acquiring by the state, you are following Turkey, don't follow. The pro-ruling party company acquired a big bookshop chain with all its bookstores almost in all cities of Turkey, and with a lot of websites, book websites. And so they have the chain now with physical stores and many different websites. So, of course, they also own their own publishers, which are more promoted in these stores and in their websites. And some of the books, translators and writers are censored or not promoted in these stores. When you ask you about a certain book, let's say, you cannot find in the shelf. They bring it from the depot, so they are not visible. And of course, the writers and the publishing houses, which are pro-ruling parties, pro-ruling party, are more visible in these shops. Of course, by doing this, they wanted to control a part of the publishing world with the aim of making their cultural hegemony stronger. So there are some books and translations. Of course, there are 2 different methods that I can say. One of them is the classical method. Yeah, they file a suit against the writers, translators, or books, and they ban the book or they confiscate the books. So this is the old traditional method. And in 2023, and by the way, so far, from the beginning of the tenure of the ruling parties, more than 700 books were banned or confiscated till today. And alongside these books, of course, there are journals, there are newspapers, and 1 million of websites or like URLs are blocked, let's say, not websites, maybe URLs blocked, the pages. For example, there are some books banned or sued with claims that they are making propaganda of a terrorist organization, and 2 books by author Murat Kahraman was confiscated when the court verdicted that there are propaganda of a terrorist organization in the books, and still you cannot find these books. They were banned and confiscated. Also, interestingly, there is, by the way, I got all of this information from the Turkish Association of Publishers. They are publishing a report for the status of publishers in each year and freedom of speech in each year in Turkey. So there is a really interesting event. In 2022, a Turkish state railways lawyer was exiled following a complaint that Selahattin Demirtaş's book Leylan was found in his drawer. So someone finds this book in his drawer and complained, and unfortunately lawyer was exiled. So as you can see, this complaint and this complaints culture in Turkey is really harmful to people's daily life. And there is another interesting issue regarding the Islam. As a result of an application by Presidents of Religious Affairs of Turkey against the work of theologian, writer İhsan Eli Açık, entitled Living Quran, an Interpretation in Turkish, on the grounds that the book contains objectionable elements in terms of the main fundaments of Islam. In February 2023, the printing and distribution of the book banned and the copies were confiscated. So the ruling party is not even supporting any type of other interpretation of Islam, and they are trying to impose their way. There is another case against a fictional universe for writers Yavuz Ekinci's novel, Those Whose Dreams Were Interrupted. The book itself was printed 2014. And unfortunately, it was ordered to be confiscated upon the request of the Istanbul public prosecutor in 2021. Today, even like this is still ongoing, the case is still ongoing, and the book, unfortunately, cannot be found, and it was confiscated. Another interesting method in Turkey, we have a board for the protection of minors from obscene publications, established in 1927, still active. And now it works under the Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Services today. And in 2023 and 2024, 8 books were declared obscene. And when they declare a book as obscene, you need to put a sign inside of the book saying that it is harmful to minors. You can only sell like that, and you need to cover it with plastic cover. So like you can sell it like that, or you cannot sell. Some of the books whose translations were declared obscene, Janet Winterson's Sexing the Cherry, Christine Baldacchino's Maurice Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress, Kathy Akers' Blood and Guts in High School, Ben Brooks' Stories for Boys Who Dare to Be Different, Rowan Kosinski, New Guest of the Naughty House. And for example, although one of our colleagues was acquitted in 2024, the prosecutor initially asked for her imprisonment up to 3 years. She was a translator, and she was accused of being mediator, being helper of dissemination of an obscene book. Unfortunately, translators are sued too because of that. So nothing has changed on the Eastern Front, I can say, but there is a distinct change on the Western Front. It is visible from Turkey. What I mean that it is very important to understand how politicians from all over the world today control freedoms of speech, even in countries we think the most progressive and democratic. Turkey has never been a place where you can express or publish your opinion very freely. On the other hand, European countries and of course other countries in the world starts to apply similar practices as Turkey has been doing to redesign the freedom of speech. I should say that in the practices of the European Union, you can see the effects of the cancel culture as well, which I find really interesting. The ruling parties in Europe especially try to shape and draw the boundaries of the freedom of speech according to their agenda in the foreign policy especially. And restrictions do not apply only publishing, it also applies to which country will participate in Olympic Games, which country should be supported in public. Very important example, a ceremony scheduled for the Frankfurt Book Fair, at which a Palestinian author, Adanya Shibli, was to receive a prestigious award, has been cancelled. Yeah? And yesterday, they told that they are giving place for far-right opinion in Frankfurt Book Fair even. So then they couldn't give an award a Palestinian author, maybe worse than a far-right. So I will not even talk about the words and methods preferred in the headlines of the prominent US and European newspapers just to show that they support Israel, or how the police violently attacked the pro-Palestinian protests in many European cities. So, and how there is no condemn on Israel's atrocities while they condemn Russian atrocities. Atrocities should be condemned irrespective of the parties committing the crime. As I said before, as a Turkish, we have been seeing very similar practices by the Turkish governments to redesign the freedom of speech. And I wouldn't believe that Europe would restrict freedom of speech like this, so welcome to the club. You won't feel easy to express your real opinions. We got used to going around the bushes. You will get used to it too. A fair warning from a Turkish citizen. If you don't want to speak about how the freedom of speech deteriorates in your own countries in our next conferences, you should consider criticizing your ruling parties that are telling you what to talk about. There will be problems regarding freedom of speech as long as its boundaries are set by the governments and the government's ideological positions. We are free to speak as much as these boundaries are low, and unfortunately, they are these days protected very well. Thank you very much.
And I would like now give the floor to Booksellers Federation and Julie Belgrado.
Thank you very much. First, thank you very much for the organizers for putting the time for a panel like this, which I think is very important. So thank you for adding this to the program and for the great conference in general. I'll give context to the picture that you can see on screen, but before that, maybe I'll say who we are. So I'm Julie Belgrado. I'm the director of the European and International Booksellers Federation. It's an organization based in Brussels. Our work is to represent the National Booksellers Association. We have members in Europe, but also outside of Europe. So stories about banned books are something that we've been working on for years. And that allows us to have a wider perspective, I'd say, on those issues for many, many years. So on the picture that you see on the screen, this is part of a month-long social media campaign that we ran 2 years ago in December 2022. We worked internally at a freedom of expression charter for our own organization, which you're going to see in the last slides. But it felt, we thought at the time it was important before unveiling the charter to raise awareness about those issues that were starting to become more and more in the news, more and more prevalent. So my colleagues work on those assets. What we wanted to show as well is that they were not happening miles away. Because, as I said, we worked for a long time with our US colleagues on banned books, but then the issues started to coming closer and closer and closer from us. Next slides. So it was important for us to highlight not only the books that were banned, but also the people that were targeted, because it was not only about censorship and books that you make disappear, but also people who want to speak up and take a stand. So that was 2 years ago. We are 2 years later now, and next slide, please. 2 weeks ago, we decided to release a report as part of our European co-funded project called Rise Bookselling. It felt well-timed because we released it actually on International Democracy Day, because we felt that the cases that were being reported to us through our membership were rising. The panel talks about publishing, translating as a political act, but selling, or actually not selling a book, is as much as of a political act. And booksellers are the ones, like librarians, actually, who are on the front end, because they meet with the customer. And the number of reports we've received all over Europe, Sweden just last week, France, Italy, of bookshops being vandalized, windows being smashed, facades being tagged, booksellers and even librarians being attacked on their workplace for the books that they decide to carry or not in the shop, were really, really worrying. So our colleague who worked on freedom of expression did some desk research in the press, but we also had interviews among our membership with booksellers who work on the ground and with booksellers association directors. And we collated all this together in this report that you can freely download on the project website, risebookselling.eu, or on the EIBF website, eibf.eu, where the report is also featured. We didn't intend at all to solve a problem. We wanted to map out the problem and see that this is happening, show that it's out there, and show that it is at our door, unfortunately. So the first part is really desk research and highlight cases. Some of them were mentioned earlier. Then we have examples and testimonies of booksellers who had to either self-censor themselves in deciding to sell or not to sell a book, who decided to not carry a book for safety reason, who decided to not do a window on the current Israel-Hamas conflict just to protect themselves. And this is not normal. So what we wanted to do this as well and release it now for booksellers to feel less isolated. Because when you arrive to work in the morning and that you see that your window has been smashed, what did I do wrong in this world? So you call the police, you report it, but then you feel really the next feeling is that you feel lonely and you have no one to talk to or to turn to. So we decided to have this for booksellers to feel that, unfortunately, they are not the only one for those to whom it is happening. And the last part of the report are resources, because that's also the sad part, is that nowadays Booksellers Association have reached a step where they need to come up with guidelines, workshops on de-escalation technique. How do I handle a customer who's angry about climate change, says to me that this doesn't exist, and then throw the book in my face? So all those resources have been collated in the report. We talked about Banned Book Week. Our colleague who works there at the American Booksellers Association released a very, very great resources 2 weeks ago, all about how to fight banned book and censorship. So the book is available on their website. I also really recommend to look at the resources, because that's where we have arrived now. Next slide. The last thing I'd like to highlight is our own internal charter organization, because we also felt that as an organization we are very often asked to co-sign a statement, to take a position, to give an opinion, and we represent a wide membership. So what we decided to do to solve this issue, to be able to react promptly when something arises and we need to react, we worked at a charter together with all the members. We submitted the charter to them, and then in Frankfurt, we had them endorsing that charter. They all signed it symbolically, so that we have internal guidelines that allow us as an organization to act fast and to respond when we are being asked to issue a statement and provide booksellers' opinion on topics like this. Next slide, and I think it's the last. Yeah, so that's the back of the charter. And I'm done.
Thank you.
And now we will change the perspective a little bit. And I ask Jørgen Christian Vin Nielsen to take the mic. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not certain that I'm going to change the perspective that much. I think maybe we are repeating each other a bit, but you always have a different perspective according to where you are. All these stories are not very amusing, I think. So if you're not depressed by now, maybe I can help you get along. I don't know how many of you think of yourselves as being involved in political activities when you write and translate, but as you can hear, you are. Now I made some slides, and here's the first of them. It's a screen dump. No, it's a photo. I took a photo of the PEN International website. And apologies for these slides. I was kind of forced to make them, but take them for what they are. The heading is Writers in a World at War. And this was the theme of the PEN International Congress last week in Oxford. I was there, and Alena Shipley, she did the keynote speech. Alena Shipley was in Copenhagen a couple of days before to speak at a great conference about literature in Denmark. So PEN International made a memorandum of understanding, I think it was last year, with CEATL, and I think this is the formal reason why we're here. And thank you for inviting us, and we hope we can contribute, not the least in the future. PEN International is an international organization based in England. It was founded in 1921, so it's more than 100 years ago. It has more than 100 centers around the world, and sometimes there are more than one center in the same country, for example, related to which language is spoken. In Germany, there are 2 centers, although they speak the same language. But for example, in Spain, you have the Basque language, you have Catalan, and you have el Castellano. There are more than 100 centers, and people in these centers, they are involved for the motivation that they have to be there. They want to promote literature, which is one strong leg describing the activities of PEN International. They want to promote literature, poetry, languages, translation, publishing, and the other leg is freedom of expression. As you can hear, if you don't have freedom of expression, that's an obstacle to the other things that we do. I am a member of the board of Danish PEN. PEN, the activities of PEN International and of all the centers are based on a charter. And this charter dates also back to the creation of PEN. It's been revised a couple of times, but basically it's the same. And I can read a few lines. The PEN Charter is on the PEN International website, so you can go and read it there. PEN International is guided by the ideals of the PEN Charter, which expresses every member's commitment to protecting the free exchange of ideas and promoting the value of literature. PEN stands for the principle of unhampered transmission of thought within each nation and between all nations, and members pledge themselves to oppose any form of suppression of freedom of expression in the country and the community to which they belong, as well as throughout the world, wherever this is possible. There are actually quite a number of PEN members here in this meeting. I have met more than I I imagined, more than I thought. So thank you for that. Now, when we meet in international meetings in PEN, like for example the Congress in last week, we have a tradition to have an empty chair. We have a reading for a writer or translator who disappeared, died in the hands of the police, was imprisoned, or whatever. So we ask ourselves, why is this chair empty? Where is this writer, author, translator? Now we have all these centers, but we also have centers in exile. I mentioned just a few, and unfortunately they're getting more. I can mention Iran, I can mention Nicaragua. What happened to the old revolutionaries in Nicaragua? I'm asking myself. Cuba, it's a long time they were revolutionary in Cuba. China, Eritrea, Russia, and of course Belarus, as you have heard. So when we are in international meetings in PEN, we are together with people who live in exile. These are artists, writers, translators, and so on. They've never done any harm to anyone. So it's strange being with people who can't live in their own countries, they can't return to their own countries. And it's a strange feeling being a member of an association where people are exposed to violence, physical violence, imprisonment, torture, and so on and so forth. But this is the reality. So when I mention these examples, you may think, thank God, this is far away from Europe. But PEN also has a case list. And this is a list of writers or translators who are at risk, they are harassed, they are threatened, etc. And this case list is updated on a regular basis. And again, unfortunately, the number of professionals on the list is increasing. I will give you a few examples. In September 2023, PEN expressed serious concern over growing challenges to freedom of expression in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Kosovo, in Montenegro, and Serbia. Outspoken writer and journalist Marko Vidojkovic had to leave Serbia following persistent death threats. And an example from Turkey, and maybe you can help me pronounce this title. In Turkey, the authorities continue to increase their influence on the media and publishing landscape, leading to a growing number of books being branded obscene and vilified by pro-government media. These are almost exactly the words that you spoke. Accordingly, Istanbul ruled that, what is the name of this book?
Rüyası bölünenler.
Meaning Dream Divided by Yavuz İkinci, included content amounting to terrorist propaganda and banned the publication, its distribution and sale. Copies of the book were also confiscated. Now, if a book is banned or illegal, it is also illegal to translate it unless you do it in another country far away. Fortunately, we have, what should I say, more positive or proactive activities in PEN. Also, PEN has different standing committees. We have 4 in all. For example, we have one called Writers in Prison. Imagine a whole committee for writers in prison. But we also have a translation and linguistic rights committee, and I'm involved in that. I'm the vice chair of that, and this is the committee that made the formalized agreements. I won't be long with CEATL. PEN has adopted a Girona Manifesto and also a Barcelona Declaration. And the translation and the Girona Manifesto goes like this. The Translation and Linguistic Rights Committee believes that translation is inseparable from linguistic rights and that the work of translators is central to the promotion of the right of all linguistic communities to be treated as equal. PEN is committed to an understanding of translation wherein all literatures, no matter how they are defined, enrich one another. And this manifesto is on the internet also in very many languages, 10, 12, 15 languages. We have a project we call Making Silence Languages Visible. And if I'm running out of time, we have produced more than 100 videos with indigenous languages from all over the world, people reciting their poetry and with English subtitles. All these videos, they're on YouTube and you can find them there. Sami seems to be interesting to many here. And at the Congress last week, we approved a statement on Sami language and literature. Could I have slide 7, please? Maybe this is slide 7. Okay. Organizations that promote literature in Norway, Sweden, and Finland should consider Sápmi as a single region for Sápmi applicants. The Sami people were there before the actual borders existed. It is praiseworthy that the Nordic countries provide translation funding from Sami to the Nordic languages through the Nordic Council, but we would like to see a greater initiative from the national authorities in Finland, Sweden, and Norway to support the production of Sami literature in general, and also an initiative towards the European Union for improved support programs to strengthen the use of Sami languages in literature and education. I think a next project might be about the Greenlandic, I'm ending now, about the Greenlandic language. Greenland is still formally a part of the Danish kingdom, and almost half of the population in Greenland live in Denmark, so it's a very interesting case. I was at the workshop yesterday called Language Equality, which was excellent with lots of very concrete cases. And I was confirmed that we are doing a political act. We really struggle, and it was interesting to hear people telling about all the efforts they do. What we have heard here today, I think we have a lot of discussions about what we can do to change situations and put languages on an equal term and promote translation and so on and so forth. I would like this assembly to also have some discussions about why the situation is as it is. Why are there hierarchies between languages? Why do states don't want to invest in language diversity? Why do true liberals see what we see as cultural and linguistic values as barriers to market access? Why do big tech companies develop technology that potentially erode our profession? Why do those in power don't like literature on gender identity, on sexuality, on political criticism, on religion? Why are books banned? Why is foreign language and translation training at universities being closed down? In Denmark, this happens at an amazing speed. Yes, so thank you. I finish here.
And I would like to the last presentation, which is called Banned Books, go in the loop for the room here, mainly, if I may ask. I gathered only a small percentage, promille, of the books banned in different countries, mainly in Europe. Since we are running out of time and we would like probably to close the conference soon, and the aim of this panel was absolutely not to solve anything about the problems we were talking about, rather to express them, say aloud, show particular cases. And writing and translating and publishing have always, somewhere in the world, been dangerous. Unfortunately, as we could hear, this situation didn't change in 21st century in Europe. So the question, open question to actually all of you, to go home with those questions and search and spread them around you. Do we see any new conditions or new tools to solve the situation, to help the banned books, banned and imprisoned writers and translators, to defend the freedom of speech in 21st century's Europe? Is European Union still an answer? Like in recent years, we've heard a lot about how European Union stops being a union of values and rather being a financial union, maybe? And what about facing artificial intelligence? Do we need to redefine the freedom of speech in the field of literature? What are the new threats? And I need, before we stop and we step off this stage, I would like to ask my panel, I asked actually in advance, about one single book to give to you, to propose for you to read, since not only the publishing, writing and translating is a political act, reading books can also be a political act. Do you have any title, any author you would like to present?
It's on since I'm not representing a country here, but an international organization, I will not be very concrete. But I mentioned Greenlandic language, and there's a Greenlandic person living in southern Denmark, let's say that. And the first time I talked to her, her name is Nadya Kandrusevich. She said to me, I have a Greenlandic identity, I have a Greenlandic background and culture, but I don't speak Greenlandic. So she said, I'm a Greenlandic person without a language. As I was in this workshop yesterday, there was another colleague who was here who said, I don't know the word in English or French, from the Alsace region, who said, I lost this language, I don't speak this language, I don't speak my own language anymore, I don't speak my mother tongue anymore. So I think this is 2 times within a couple of weeks I hear this statement. So I think this is gives occasion to some reflection. So yeah, thank you.
Ágnes Orzóy?
My suggestion is a Hungarian book. It's entitled Revised Edition by Péter Eszterházy, and it exists in some of your languages and it doesn't exist in others. You may have heard the name of Péter Eszterházy. He's a major Hungarian writer who died a few years ago, and he wrote a book called Celestial Harmonies, which was about how his father was a paragon of virtue during communism. And then he finished this book, which is really a masterpiece, and he went to the archives to find out that his father was in fact an agent of the communist regime. And then he wrote Revised Edition. And I think it's very relevant to the topic we're talking about, because it shows how dictatorship crushes people. And also it talks about this experience with literary devices. So it's not a plot, it's not an easy reading, it's a very difficult reading. But it also, I think it also says a lot about how self-censorship and how silencing works in any society.
Ágnes? Julie, sorry.
Yeah, so when I first received Justyna's question, I tried to be original and also go for an author who's still alive. And actually, I could only go back to basics, which was my first university course. It was philosophy, and it was about the development of European thinking. And I thought about Plato, because his allegory of the cave, for me, is very much a lesson and an allegory of looking at things differently, thinking outside the box, and understanding maybe things from the outside, which is, I think, we very, very much need today. It's this empathy of trying to understand how the other thinks.
Thank you. Yeah, Alena?
Well, I would recommend Prison Diary of Ales Beliatsky, just to remind about people of Belarus who are sitting now behind the bars, and also to understand the value and the price for human rights. This is my...
Thank you. Furkan, do you have any now? You have.
I will absolutely recommend to read or reread the book that I've already mentioned today, the book Pippi Longstocking, Astrid Lindgren, because it's a really not only usual children's book, but the book about freedom and a lot of courage.
And actually the book which was banned or censored in different countries in different times. And I have a proposal for you from Great Britain by the author Antoine Cassar. It's a book called Passport. It has a form of passport. This is the Polish edition, translated by Zuzanna Gawron. I won't say anything about this book, but please have it, all of you. You deserve it. And please buy more for your friends and families. Anne Mistrel, on the opening night on Wednesday, Anne Mistrel from the city of Strasbourg, pointed out, now I quote, really from just 2 days ago, translation is needed for freedom. I strongly believe that we, people of letters, are able to change reality. Thank you.